Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Allen. With me, as always, Rod the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's going on, man?
Hey, I am doing great. I'm doing great as usual, but I do at this time of year, there's a little bit of mourning going on because college football ended.
You and this college football thing. I think you're taking this too far. There's too close to heart, my friend.
I was
goes there
half
once.
the year, and
I mean,
just missed it the other half.
Well, it's only there like 3 months, So like you get 3.5 months of, so you just got to find something else, man. That's all I'm going to tell you. You have to find something else to fill that void.
Yeah,
I believe in you though. You've got 7 kids, you've got grandkids. I think you can find something to fill that college football void.
Yeah, I appreciate that vote of confidence.
Okay, but I appreciate you being open about that because I don't know if everyone is going to be that vulnerable and just like, about something that's so precious.
Putting it out there. Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, Rod, anything else important going on in the life of Mr. the Pod Zabriskie?
That's that.
Other than college football not being there? Okay, good. Right. Well, that being the case, let's talk money and business. So this is going to be a little bit of a throwback pod. Do you remember when we first started the podcast? My intro was "Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast," where we talk all things money and business.
Yes.
We've tended to lean more toward money, but I wanted to do a little bit of a throwback and talk business because a lot of people, they may or may not know this about me. I'm more passionate about building business than I am about building wealth. Now, it just so happens that oftentimes those things go together in a really, incredible synergistic way. But like if you were asking me what gets me like my blood pumping and more excited, it's not the money stuff. It really is about building, growing, producing. Like that's what gets me going. So for that reason, I thought, you know what, this is going to be fun. Let's talk about how to build a 7-figure business, ... without burning out. Okay. Because both of those are important. And, we talk about like, it's interesting. You could call it a 7-figure business in the traditional sense, but I also think about like a lot of the clients that we have who are surgeons who basically build a 7-figure income life, right? And a 7-figure income, may in some ways be better than a 7-figure business, depending on what that underlying business is and if it could be sold later. So my point is just to say, like, I think that this can apply to everybody. The principles, the ideas, the strategies, the things we're going to be talking about will actually apply to everybody, but we're going to put it in the context of how to build a 7-figure business that we can kind of keep running, that can become part of our life and not run our life, right? So in other words, it works for us instead of us working for it.
Yeah. I think that we could even take it a step further. And I think the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is geared toward the owner. And yet, if you're an executive in a business and you hear these concepts, these principles, they're totally going to apply because you're building a business, right? You're in the business of building that business. And so it'll work.
Yep, it will work. Okay, so I want to start by just talking about some of the issues that can be, or some of the things that can cause burnout, right? Some of the things that we typically see that will make us like exhausted, overwhelmed, and feeling like it's just not worth it. Because again, in order to get to a 7-figure business, you've got to figure out how to push through those types of things. And we've been fortunate on doing it for a long period of time to get to that place. So like we know about some of the ups and downs, and certainly in our business, we've had both ups and downs, right? We've had struggles. Like sometimes we do throwback thinking about the early days when like it was just hard to get anything done. And so like we understand this. We've experienced it. We've also experienced another bit, obviously we talk about how we owned the day spa and that's a totally and an entirely different type of business. But I feel like the same principles applied inside that business as they do inside of our core business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Okay, so let's talk about them. The first one is just overworking. I mean, that's like the prototypical business owner. You just feel like they're just grinding day to day. They're getting up earlier. Everybody, there's, earlier than everybody. They're staying up later. All of that is well and good. And the truth be told, you've got to be willing to grind, especially in those early stages, right? Like, I do believe like you can work like nobody will work in order to live like few people get to live like that. I think that concept is true. Except that I would take that and say, like, instead of just working like to make it part of the grind, you've got to be working to accomplish something. Efficiency, working smart is always going to be better than working just as hard as I possibly can, right? So overworking is a problem, and a lot of times what I see is that people overwork because they don't take a step back in the business and think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and could I be doing it better? But that's got to be a constant thing for a business owner.
Absolutely.
Okay, so overworking is the first one. The next one is this is what I've got you here for, Rod. You have a lack of systems and delegation. I know that systems have to be put in place. I value them tremendously, and yet I struggle in some ways to actually like go and integrate those myself and put them into place. But luckily, we know each other's strengths, and that's something that you're much better at. But can I just tell you, when I take a step back in the business and I look at all of the things that get done that are automated, that are systematized, that I don't think anything about anymore at this stage of the business. Like, there's still just a lot getting done day to day regardless. You know what I mean? And again, the reason that happens is because we've made sure to put in those. So anyway, from your perspective, Rod, why do you think kind of having a lack of systems and delegation in general can cause burnout? I mean, I think maybe it's obvious, but just talk through it.
Yeah, and I think those first two go hand in hand, because if you're overworking, sun up to sundown, burning candle at both ends, all those things, and it's all on you. If you don't show up, nothing happens. That's the worst place to be, right? So sometimes, like you said, sometimes just in the beginning, you just have to, like, you're wearing all those hats, but you have to work yourself out of a lot of those hats, so that if you step away when you do some of the things we're going to talk about here later, and taking time for yourself and that kind of thing, you can do that. Things still continue to work in your absence. And so you can take those steps back, and hopefully eventually all of us kind of want to have a way to exit at some point, but it's working towards that. And that's what this is. The systems that you put into place that have automations, right now we can use AI. There are just so many different opportunities with technology to do that. And in most businesses situation, you hire employees as well. That allows you to hand a bunch of things off. That work continues even while you're taking the evening to spend time with your spouse or whatever, right?
Yep. And that really is critical, because again, you end up being a slave to your business the longer that you're the person wearing all of the hats. So one of the pieces of advice I would give to people is, the moment it's possible is when you should start trying to look for somebody else to help you build, right? It's really hard to hire that first person. And sometimes that's why you do partnerships. Like when we started our business, it was more like, it was more that I needed support in certain things, and you were able to provide the role that I needed help for. And it wasn't me traditionally paying you like an hourly rate or something.
Right.
We were just partnering in things that you were good at that helped me. And so like sometimes you have to be innovative, right? But one way or another, you've got to start like developing a support and delegation system so that you can spread and just get more done. And obviously, when you work with the right people, you end up getting, multiplying your skill set and getting a lot more done, the two of you, than either one of you could on individually, or that both of you could individually, if that makes sense.
Right. Yep.
Okay, this next one's a big one, and this is right up Christian's alley. I really believe that this is important. People tend to focus too often on revenue instead of profitability. In fact, every time I hear business talking about revenue, I'm like, I just don't care. I don't care what your revenue is, right? Now, I get that the tech companies, like, sometimes it looks a little different in an early startup, but like for most businesses, the bottom line ends up being, can I create a profit, right? Because the revenue just doesn't matter if I'm equal to, under, or even just it's got to make that, like, that's the number that counts. And so it's funny to me still, I just think about business after business, and almost always people are talking about the revenue that they produce. And to me, it should always be about the profitability that the business produces. So anyway, that kind of lack of focus on the right numbers in my mind can kind of lead to the wrong results, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can be getting excited about revenue when you shouldn't be, Rod.
Well, yes, and the problem is, or kind of like the joke that you often hear is, I know we're working at a loss, but we'll just make it up in volume, right? So if the revenue number gets bigger, then that's the thought process is that will drive profitability, but you have to make that happen. You have to make sure that's the case because, well, let me just say this: if you're working at a loss and you do higher revenue, you have higher losses. You're just digging a bigger hole.
Right. So you've got to make sure that that gap is decreasing and, moving in your favor. So anyway, I think as a business community, we should probably adjust our focus and be a little more laser focused on profitability, since that's really what matters. Okay. Next one is equally important, Rod, and that's neglecting health, family, and just overall personal well-being. That's again the prototypical. These all go hand in hand, right? These are all the things that cause burnout, so it makes sense. The overworked business owner who's doing everything themselves, wearing all those hats, not spending enough time exercising or spending time with their family. And by the way, I've been this person that hasn't spent enough time doing some of these important things that I wish I would have. And you feel it later. And luckily, I'm in a position today where I've been able to kind of say, okay, now that my business is in a lot more stable position, I'm doing those things. But here's the deal. I wish that I just would have done it from the beginning. You know what I mean? I'd be in a better place today if I would have done that, made sure that I was focusing or allowing myself to focus on my health, family, and personal well-being. I just feel like I would be in a better place than I am today, even though I'm thankful and where I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think balance is the key word here, right? The burnout usually comes when you have lack of balance. And let's be honest, if you haven't put enough time into the business, then you're not going to make it profitable on that side either, right? So it's not getting too crazy in one direction or the other, but really having that balance, creating a situation where you're able to fulfill that need to build the business, to grow it, to get it to where you want it to be. And you're actually better off when you're doing that if you have the balance, you have the time away from it with your family, thinking about other things. You come back stronger as a result.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, let's shift gears here, Rod. I want to talk about, we've talked about some of the things that can cause us to burn out before we create the 7-figure business that's sustainable, that's working for us. Let's talk now about what we're going to call the 4 pillars of sustainable 7-figure businesses. Number 1, Rod, is systemization. I'm going to let you talk about it. Why is it crucial?
Yeah, I mean, it's what allows you to accomplish what you can. So I've been doing some economics study or whatever, and one of the things that I learned about. So Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations back in 1776, kind of the I don't know, beginnings, or so to speak, of economics. And one of the things he wrote about was he would visit manufacturing, different facilities, and he went to a place that made pins, right? And his observation was that in their process, they had 18 different steps to make a pin. And you might be like, well, that's pretty simple little thing. Why does it take that many steps? And what he said was, if you had one individual who had the skill set and could go through all the steps, then in a day he could make 20 pins. But because they had different people, it wasn't 18 people, so there was one per, some of the steps were done by the same person, but by moving it through that system, they could make 4,800 pins in a day, right? So having a system.
Exponential. I was excited, Rod. I was like, what number is he going to say? Is he going to say 80 pins a day? No.
Yeah.
That's a lot more pins.
Yeah. So now if you think about your own business or the business you want to build, and all of the different tasks, pieces of the process that have to take place, and you are able to systematize those things, then and obviously today a pin shop, it's not individuals doing all those things. It's a lot of machinery, right? And so it's gone again exponentially
hyper efficient from that point.
Yeah, I don't know what the number would be today, but it's going to be in the probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of someone pushing the button, and the machinery does the work, and they're just there to make sure it goes smoothly. And that's obviously the other extreme. Not all of our businesses are going to be at that level where it's just push a button. But I think we should all have the goal to be working towards that as much as we can accomplish. And I want to be really careful here, because I've seen people in the process of setting up systems that it becomes brainless. And then all of a sudden you have all these problems and mistakes that are happening. So we don't want to remove thinking. We just, as much as we can, we want to, it's not even removing effort. It's just making that effort more efficient, more productive, right?
Yeah.
So you still show up, you still do your thing, but as you get the systems in place and define processes and everybody on the same page and working in tandem, et cetera, then it just that productivity, the efficiency takes hold, and you can just get a lot more done in the same time.
Yeah, that's the magic word. It becomes more efficient. That's what the people on the line did, but then the machines do. And in our businesses, there's so many things that we can do to become more efficient. So the other thing I would just say is we don't want to lose personalization and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So at least now, there are some businesses, let's be real, that don't require a lot of that kind of stuff, right? Sure. But in a lot of our businesses, like there is a strong element, especially if it's like a service type business, like those are always going to rely at least somewhat on that authentic personalization. And so while we're doing this, we're not saying eliminate all of those things that can be really valuable. We're just saying take the things that we can create as much efficiency around and make them, and create a system to actually do that the best way possible. And then, you do it again and again. Okay. In order to do that, you have to do the second pillar, Rod, which is you've got to delegate. Leaders just have to delegate. That's just the way it is. Now, that doesn't mean like you're commanding people to do things. Like I just genuinely believe you can delegate, and the people around you can feel totally bought in, excited about the business. And they can even feel empowered, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking at it and like giving them an opportunity to be empowered. So like, I'm definitely not somebody who's like a micromanager. That's just not my personality. And generally what I believe it does is it lets people just kind of like run and become, kind of do their thing. And so like, now every leader is different. I'm not necessarily saying there's a right or wrong way to do this, but one way or another, our businesses become more efficient, and it's just so difficult to run a 7-figure business if I'm not becoming good at delegating.
And you kind of hit on some things earlier that I think dovetail into this, and that is you have to recognize where you have the skills and build people around you who can take away the things that you're just not good at, right? You have to, right? If you're going to get there, you really have to have people who are good at what they do. And that frees you up to do the stuff that you're more skilled in. And then to your point, for those people where that is their skill set, then you empower them. You make it so that it's a fulfilling thing for them to show up to work every day and own it. Like if you don't want to micromanage, like there are different leadership styles, and some are more hands-on, some are less, some need to be more hands-on. But if you're not empowering the people and really making them want to show up every day and own what they're doing, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you're the one getting in the way of that happening.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Okay, Rod, I realized something. I jumped down from systemization to delegation without adding a critical step, and that is the action steps. We've got to have action steps. So I want to make sure that I hit on the action steps for both systemization, which is pillar number 1, and for delegation, which is pillar number 2. So just want to make sure I'm identifying where we're talking about. We're talking about systemization. Here are the things that I need to be thinking about. Actually, these are the things I need to be doing, not just thinking about, doing. Mm-hmm. Number 1, I need to identify repetitive tasks and create processes around those. Number two, I need to invest in automation. Man, I love automation. It does so much. Invest in automation. If that's something you're struggling with, you just got to take the plunge and do it. And then the other one that's really critical is that you've got to document workflows just in general, because everything becomes more efficient when you get to step two and you're delegating. If you now have to bring somebody on and you're trying to think through what that actual workflow looks like while you're teaching, it just becomes really difficult. So the best thing you could do is document those on the front end, so that as you're bringing people on that you are ultimately going to delegate things to, now they have it, it's ready to go. It just makes everybody's life easier. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's systemization. Do you have anything to add to that, Rod, before I jump back down to delegation?
No, I will when we get to delegation, because again, like you said earlier, they work hand in hand.
Okay. So now we're on the action steps. We talked about why it's crucial already. The action steps. Number one, we have to identify our highest value tasks. Okay. That's just critical. Again, as leaders, like if you want to build a 7-figure business, you just have to do this. You have to take a step back and make sure that you're doing the things that are the highest value. So number one, identify highest value tasks. Number two, hire a team member to handle as much as you can, right?
Yep.
Hire a team member or team members to do as much as possible. It puts you in a position to spend your time in those really high value tasks, right? And then the last one is, and I like this one. I actually listened to a podcast about this. It was the guy that wrote an 80-20 book. I can't remember his name, but he said to embrace the 80-20 rule. That's what this one says. That's what our rule here is. And understanding the 80-20 rule, which is basically just that 80% of productivity gets done by 20% of the people. It's just kind of that, like, and you can apply it to a lot of different situations. So when I was listening to him, he was applying it basically everywhere. And to be totally honest, like it kind of makes sense. Like it feels like typically that's the way it goes. Now, every rule is made to be broken. So I'm not suggesting that that's like an always thing, but the idea is just understand the way that that people typically work. And that way you're able to get the right people in the right places on the bus and make sure that your best people are doing the things that are most important. And you ultimately are spending your time on the very highest priority steps, things that need to get done in the business.
Yeah, specific to your skill set, right? And that's where I think, so I've brought this up before, but there's a book called E-Myth, Michael Gerber. And that's really the focus of that book is, even if you are a one-person shop, that you still identify the different roles that you fill. And as you grow, you're basically taking that role and handing it to somebody else, or multiple roles as you hire, and you're handing that off to somebody else. But they've already been identified. You've already figured out where your best skill set is, what you want to hang on to, because it just makes the most sense for you to own that. And then what strengths you need to hire for, so that you have other people that can do those other things that either are less effective for you, or, let's be honest, just the things you don't want to do, right? You'd rather be doing other things. Great, we'll hire someone else to do those things so you can stay engaged, stay passionate about what you're doing.
And it improves your overall quality of life as time goes on, and you're able to do that. Like, again, if the goal is to get our business to work for us, not us to work for our business, like, it's not only more practical, more efficient, it's also just better. Like, it can make us genuinely happier.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this brings me to the thing I was going to say when you asked the thing, but both systemization and delegation is, I keep going back to this, but it's the thing that allows you to be able to step away and things keep going, right?
And that's the best.
You build momentum as a team. Any individual can step out, have their personal time, take a vacation, whatever that is, and the things still work. And so you can have that balance.
Yep. Okay. So pillar number 3 then is profitability over revenue. I kind of went on a little rampage about that earlier. So I'll just say that I just think it's critical, because at the end of the day, you can't live off of a revenue that's not outpacing your debt. So it doesn't matter what your revenue is. If your debt isn't significantly lower than that, it just doesn't do you any good. And I just think, again, that people typically spend too much time thinking about that. And, so there are situations where it can make sense. Like I said, if you're creating a startup and the goal is to sell the business in 2 or 3 years and you've got plenty of reserves on the side, like, that's a different strategy. But I'm talking about the typical business owner who's, usually they're either buying a business or they're starting something from scratch, one of those two things, and they've got to get profitable as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they're not going to be in the business of owning a business anymore. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
And
it's
one of the reasons for that is because even if you put everything on paper and you say, okay, this is what our margins should be, well, unless you've already built in for all the different things that can go wrong, including like regulation and other things that tax that can creep in and cut into your margin, or more mistakes that employees make or things like that. That actually reminds me of an experience I had. So I used to, way back when, or just after I graduated from college, I worked in the construction industry. And one time I was at a meeting, and a lot of the subcontractors were just complaining about how, because the margins are so small, that they can't afford for their employees to make mistakes, which I think is especially in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
The kinds of mistakes that are made can be really costly. And yet, as I thought and I listened to them, I just felt like in a way, though, you have to build that in. Like, you have to know that there will be mistakes that are going to be made, and you can't always anticipate what they're going to be and what they're going to cost. But if you don't build that into your numbers, then how do you expect that you will be profitable? Because it's the end game. After all the expenses, the profit comes in, or it doesn't. And so we have to be aware of, and obviously we want to avoid those. We want to try to do, with the training and all these different things, try to make it so those mistakes don't happen. That makes us more profitable, but you still have to think about that. So that's kind of a narrow niche example, and yet I think all of us need to think about that in terms of not just the profit that I am planning on, but then looking back and measuring and seeing where the holes are, where the leaks are that eat into that profitability, so that I can hopefully shore those up. And or if shoring them up just really isn't possible on the whole, then building it into my model so that I can anticipate the correct profitability, so I know I can plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Okay, so I think what we want to do is hit on our action steps, and then we're going to talk about pillar number 4. So what do I do when I want to make sure that I'm focusing on profitability over revenue? Number 1, I've got to regularly review my financial statements. That's like a painful one. So for people like me, this one's like, oh, I hate it. And yet it's just so critical, because if you don't know what's going on there, then it's obviously going to be impossible to identify the leaks like you talked about, right? I cannot identify, or I can't fill leaks that I don't even know exist. And it's easy inside of a business. Like, I think about the day spa, and there's just so much going on. There's product going in and out. There's a ton of employees. Like, there are all of these things that are happening. And so if you're not regularly reviewing financial statements, knowing what's going in and out, this becomes something that can be a real problem real fast. So do that. Okay. Second one is focus on high margin products and services or activities. I think at the end of the day, if we're going to be profitable, it's critical that our mindset just sticks in that place. And so if that's the focal point, then it just makes sense that we're going to be focused on high margin things. And can I just be honest with you, this is when I take a step back in our own business, like, we 100% live this. And what I mean by that is we speak traditionally to high income earners, right? High income earners have money. They can invest. They can do that. They can work inside of the products at a high level that we sell. Does that make sense? Yeah. So one of the reasons that we've been able to get where we've gotten is because we created and developed a specialty in a focused niche market that also happens to create high profitability. So when you're creating a sustainable 7-figure business, that just ends up being a really critical thing. And again, firsthand experience, we've seen the difference between the spa, which was not that built that way. Those are built on a lot of volume and slim margins, whereas our business is built on a much more profitable model because we work with the right types of people consistently. And so whatever your business model is, that's what you've got to be focusing on, the thing that actually will create profitability, right? It can't be, in our example, Rod, I'm thinking back, it can't be Groupon. Groupon is not the solution. That's kind of an inside joke, because we were like, when we started the day spa, there was just tons of Groupon being pushed, but and there was a ton of volume being pushed into the spa, but there was no profitability. Well, there's a big difference between the two. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. And this may be one of those things where when we say it, you're like, well, duh, like everybody would want to have high profit and the high margin stuff going on. But the thing that I'll just say is, yes, of course, it's one of those things that seems obvious. And yeah, like in the case of the day spa, we just got to a place where we had to step away. So we sold it and we had to walk away because, yeah, it would have been great to get it to a place where we could have created the higher margins. We weren't the ones that were going to be able to do that. We had to hand it off to someone else who had proven successful in a different market of making that happen. And so I think what it does is it forces you to get real, right?
Yeah.
If you again, yes, everybody wants high profit stuff, and if you just get to the place where you say, I've tried, I'm working towards wanting that, but I'm just not getting there, then maybe you have to make a more wholesale shift away from what you're trying, because it just may not be what you want it to be and what you need it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. The third action step, Rod, this one is one you hit on earlier, but don't grow for the sake of growth. Basically, you mentioned, right? If you grow, but your margins are upside down, your growth just ends up being more debt.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to grow with purpose instead of just growing for the sake of growth and getting excited about the fact that revenues are moving up. We can't make the assumption that because our revenues are going up, that the margins are going to get better and the profitability is suddenly going to change. There obviously can be breakpoints that support that, but you've just got to be more purposeful rather than and intentional, rather than assuming that focusing kind of exclusively on growth is going to get us there.
Right.
Okay. Pillar number 4, Rod. And again, we're trying to focus on a sustainable 7-figure business, no burnout. We've also got to protect our own energy. We've got to protect our health, our family, all of those things that create good energy in our world. That's really, really important. Not just for our life outside of our business, but for the efficiency inside of our business, right?
Yeah.
A person who's happy and balanced and manage stress. If not, things get out of whack, and we're not only our worst selves outside of our business, we're our worst selves inside of the business. So the person that's balanced is ultimately going to be a better business owner. We just see it time and time again. What's your take on this?
I think of it from two angles. The one is what you're saying, where you need a break, you need to be fresh, have the energy, etc. And the second thing I think of is, Stephen Covey's, one of his 7 habits was sharpen the saw. Sometimes you're taking a step back to gain more skills, get trained, learn, get a different perspective, spend time with different people, etc. Meditate, whatever that is, that does both of those things, right? It gives you the break, gives you the rest, gets you more invigorated, and you're coming back with more skills, more knowledge.
Yeah, I like that one. That makes a lot of sense. I think back on my own journey in running the business, and some of the best breaks that I've had have been in correlation with the business in some way, but have just been doing something entirely different than what I would do in my typical work week, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that really helps people kind of take things to the next level. So anyway, I really like that you brought up sharpening the saw, and you can do it. You can absolutely do it in conjunction with this idea of protecting your energy, because sometimes it's just taking a break from the regular things that I do day in and day out that kind of invigorates our soul, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard. You're thinking about all the things that you're not getting done while you're away. And yet think about how much better equipped you'll be when you come back to tackle those things because you took a breakaway. And again,
so you're protecting I totally agree. You're protecting your energy. That's your emotional energy, your physical energy, your mental energy. All of these things are better if you create balance. And so, like you said, sharpening the saw is one element, just taking a rest. All of those things that we need to be doing will help us be better when we're in our business. And then we can go take those other steps, right? We're going to be better at creating efficiencies. We're going to be better at delegating. We're going to be better at focusing on profitability, all the things that create a sustainable, really high quality business that works in our favor. Okay. Key takeaways or key action steps. Number 1, time blocking. Rod, have you heard of time blocking? Do you ever time block? I'm not I don't really time block. I'm going to be honest with you, but that was one of the ideas that I thought of, and I was like, okay, well, I think a lot of people really do like it and do well with it. I'm more of a like run my life inside my business and my business inside my life, and my family is like kind of part of that, but I also make sure that I take breaks and so for me, I'm not as focused on time blocking, but what's your take on that?
Some things that I do have to be that way. And so for example, if I'm involved in say it's a task that involves a lot of like accounting numbers, that kind of thing, and if I don't do the process from beginning to end in one sitting, then it's going to take twice as long to get it done, because if I have to come back, okay, where was I? What did I leave off on? Whatever. What did I start? What didn't? It's a mess. Like I may have to even just start over completely. Like, okay, forget about it. I have to. So there are some tasks that just you have to build out that way. And so you have to set aside the time, block it off your calendar, know you're going to have enough time to get it done. And then other things, it's just more effective that way. And this isn't, we don't all have this luxury, but as an example, when I was in the kind of construction industry, I worked for an engineering company, and the owner, one of the things that he told the engineers, again, because they are engaged in this kind of deep thinking mode where they have to be thinking things through and be very methodical in the design process and all this kind of stuff. And so he would ask them, set email aside, look at your email maybe 2 or 3 times a day, block off some time where you're doing that. Because if you're always being interrupted by the next email that comes in, then that takes away from where you were. It's going to take you time to get back into where you left off. And so even though actually in this case the email, that task isn't something that by itself had to be, it's that interruption, like removing some of those interruptions, or not removing, you still have to respond. Like it's very important, to get to those emails in that example, but it's not more important. And it's so much so that it's worth the interruption.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. So there, as I think back on it, as I was like kind of taking a quick run at my own work day, my own work week, I do a little bit more time blocking than I even realized. Obviously, like our podcasting time is very specific each week, and we get there, and it absolutely helps to know that we're going to be doing it at this time each week. I need to be prepared with these certain things. So anyway, it's one of those things that like I probably have the good fortune of not having to do it like every single day, but I can absolutely see the value of it. And I think most good leaders figure out how to time block in a way that's effective for them. Okay. The second one, Rod, this one's critical. Like if you're not doing this, you've got to be doing this. Regular massages. Okay. That one's for me. That was specific for Christian. Get regular massages. Really, to me, it means like that could be meditation. It could be something that relaxes you, something that gives you a chance to unwind and get away from, try not to think about some of the things that are going on in business. And for me, that's massages. I can get into like a really relaxed, comfortable state that I typically can't. And so one of the things I do is I make time to do that regularly because I know it makes me better in other areas of my life. Now, again, I get it. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But it doesn't have to be a massage. It like exercise is another element, right? Like you could 100%, and I make sure I exercise every day too, because those are two things that reduce anxiety and stress and let me be a better leader, a better business owner, a better father, all of those things. So anyway, this one is more about doing what's right for you and making sure that you're taking a chance to step away and just relax.
Yeah. So for me, it's getting out in the outdoors. I live where I live for a reason. I have quick access to the mountains, water, whatever, all this kind of stuff. And so I get that release,
Yeah. Connecting with nature. That's a great way to do it. I totally agree. And I believe in that too. I love taking my morning walks at like 5:30 a.m. Now. It's a little cold. It's been like 7 degrees in the morning at that time. So I haven't been taking morning walks lately, but I totally agree. There's a bunch of different things that we can be doing that help us be better. And it's probably not one thing. It's probably like, I know that you go play basketball in the morning sometimes still. Like all of these things just kind of get us away from it and help us feel better. And they help us be our best self when we need to be, when we're kind of in the business and we need to make good decisions.
Yeah. Okay. And lately I've been doing more pickleball, which actually covers a couple of.
Are you playing indoor pickleball?
Indoor, yeah. We've got at the church. They mark the lines. We set up the net.
Okay, look at you
and
go.
The gym.
Okay, so I'm building one, Rod.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
So
excited.
in a little while, you'll be coming to my house to play pickleball.
Yeah,
But
I'm
not
excited.
this year. Not this year.
But the reason I bring that up is because it is that exercise, but it's also I'm doing it with family. So Jody and I went this morning. We often do it with
fun.
the kids. So it's kind of getting
Okay, well,
both of
I'm
those.
excited. You're practicing up so that
I'm going to be ready.
be ready to take me out next year.
Yeah.
Hey, that sounds good. Okay, the last one, take micro breaks, vacations to reset. I think those are just good ideas, right? Like it's always hard to take a break, but if you do a little prep on the front end, it makes it a lot easier. So I would just say make it a focal point, because again, all of these things, in my belief, will make you better when you are in your business. So
I agree.
you just have to get away at times. It just reset it. You feel better. You feel refreshed.
Yep.
Okay, so those are our 4. Let me make sure that we got all of them. I'm going to review really quickly. The first one, Rod, systemization. Second one, delegation. Pillar 3, profitability over revenue. And finally, we have to protect our energy. Okay, I want to talk about some simple habits that we can do kind of on a day-to-day basis. And really, these are things we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to get into it like a ton of detail here. We're going to close things up pretty quick. But I just want to emphasize the role of like our mindset in all of this. Like if we're going to run a 7-figure business, we have to get our minds right. And that's like the starting point, right? Everything trickles down from having the right ideas. So like I think about podcasts like this, and I listen to podcasts, and I've always been into personal self-help and that kind of thing. And sometimes I would listen to things and I'd be like, well, that's not like very practical, right? It doesn't help me right now. Like I don't get it. And what's happened is over time, as I've like practiced the principles, those higher level concepts become like more clear to me, right? They become more obvious. Like, oh, you're right. I have had to do these things in order to get to this place, or I've lacked these things and that's kept me from getting to this place. So I think, and I mean, this is obvious to most of us, but like just that mindset has to be right. And so doing all of the things that we're talking about, and again, on a day-to-day basis, that means things like exercise and things that relieve stress in our lives. It also means when we're in the business, we've got to be ultra focused on the highest level priorities. We've still got to review financials. We've got to delegate. All of these things have to get done. The best way to do it is to make sure that we're focusing as leaders on the things that we're best at. We're delegating to other people, getting the right seats on them in the right seats on the bus. And once that happens, man, it's really amazing what a business can become. It really is. I think about all of the incredible businesses, like, and how much manpower and how much leadership and buy-in they take. It's really an incredible thing when it takes off.
Absolutely. And one thing that I want to hit on of the items we have here, we're probably not going to hit on all of them, but the power of saying no is that's my weakness. I see something, I'm like, I can do that. And
that
I
is
take
your
it
weakness,
on,
Rod.
whether I should or not, I'm doing it. and I have to, but it's
I
by
love it
doing the
about
things
you.
we talked about. It's by putting systems in place. It's by getting other people and being able to hand those things off. And there are always little loose ends here and there that I need to clean up or whatever. I say I need to. Do I? That's the question, right? I need to figure out ways to clean that up a little better.
Okay, well, I think those are good parting thoughts. I've probably ranted enough about it, but I just know from my experience of owning a business that's profitable, like it really is an incredible freedom that comes. Like people say money can't buy happiness. It absolutely cannot, but it can buy a lot of things that can help us create happiness. Like it buys freedom. One less, like I can't tell you how nice it is to not worry about money on a day-to-day basis. Like that's just a really big blessing. And it all comes back to focusing on doing the right things and building a business that, works for us and creates the life that we want. And so anyway, the purpose of this episode, more than anything else, was to just hopefully inspire people to do the same, or just to keep building if they're already on that track.
I like it.
Okay. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights Podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.